Hey, Vicki Street here. A couple years ago, I went through a traumatic experience that changed my life forever. And ever since then, I've been an advocate for mental health awareness and want to share a very special opportunity with you. On March 25th, the National Council for Mental Well-Being and the Wellness Haven Co. will be offering mental health first aid training. That means you can get certified to recognize, de-escalate, and ultimately empower individuals in the situations they may be going through. This one-time training is a 6-hour virtual session valued at $175, but Vicki Street Show listeners can take advantage of a $75 promo deal by visiting thewellnesshaven.co. Now let's start the show. And remember, mental health matters.
The Vicki Street Show. You know she got it. You wanna see her. You know she got it. You wanna be her. You know she got it. You wanna meet her. You know she got it. You wanna be her. Who that bad bitch coming through the door? The voice of the streets. You already know. And if you wanna see her, gotta throw some dough. Her way the only way, she gotta make control. Who that bad bitch coming through the door? The voice of the streets. You already know. And if you wanna see her, gotta throw some dough. Her way the only way, she gotta make control.
Who that bad bitch coming through the door? Don't need no introduction. I'ma make them say my name. Look, it ain't up for discussion. These niggas tussling. Who gon' ice this wrist for a bad bitch? Gotta be quicker than that. If you want me, gotta trick off the bag. Don't give a fuck about the tag. Your girl been up in the lab, and I got some girls too. If you wanna collab, you know I ain't tripping off that. I got that mac sauce, salad toast, second nature. Been a boss. Shoulda never let me have no money, cause I don't even see a cost. Ballin' like lacrosse. You see these Caucasian ducats out in Phuket, Thailand with my man, stuck to the plan. Now I shoot shop in Japan. You bitches been a fan. Don't worry about what I put up and worry about that minivan. Ay.
Coming through the door. The voice of the streets. You already know. And if you wanna see her, gotta throw some dough. Her way the only way, she gotta make control. She got 'em saying, who that?
What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Vicki Street, and you are watching yet another episode of The Vicki Street Show. And today, I'm so excited because this is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Today, we are merging music and mental health, and today, I have a host of folks who work in the mental health field, some of which they work with me very closely. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we're going to start right here with my girl Britt. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Brittany Rogers. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and a certified alcohol and drug counselor. I'm also an author. I have a book entitled The Things I Wish I Knew, A Millennial's Guide to Learning the Mental and Emotional Concepts that the school system and our parents didn't teach us. I do YouTube. Make sure you check me out, Keeping It a Buck with B, where I talk about relationship dynamics, family dynamics, mental health, and emotional wellness. And I like to consider myself the non-traditional therapist.
Period. You ran it down. Okay.
Hey everyone, this is Tene Robinson, aka _ selfie connoisseur on Instagram. I am your radical self-love advocate, Black mental health influencer, as well as a certified mental health first aid instructor and cognitive behavioral techniques life coach. So bring a real world experience and a lot of self-love to what I'm doing in the world.
Period.
All right. I'm Elaine Smith. I am also a licensed clinical professional counselor. I have my own private practice. It's called CJL Counseling Services, but also known as Adult and Child Trauma Services. I also have a book out. It's actually a workbook for women to almost strengthen your inner queen, which gives them an opportunity to explore some of the traumas that we deal with on a daily basis, but we really don't explore and be aware of. So I really like that. And also another thing that I do is I have a women's conference
Period.
that we have where we come together as a community to support one another, as well as network and learn different ways to truly have self-love within ourselves and take care of ourselves in a better space.
Okay.
So I'm Sherann Ivy. I'm a mental health nurse practitioner. I have my doctorate degree. I'm here with all the lovely therapists. I do focus in medication management. I also focus in African American studies. There's so much trauma in our race, women, African American. I also do private practice. I have my own practice. It's called Sunshine Psychiatry. It's in the medical district. Not a big on social media, but you can find me if you Google me.
I just like how you said that, like Google me,
Google me.
period. It's gonna pop up.
You gonna find me.
Okay, bet. Well, the year is 2023. It is February, and we are in Chicago. And I'm sitting amongst some mental health professionals. And I just want to know, as we have, quote unquote, came up out of the pandemic, how do you feel like our brains have changed? I've been hearing, I even heard on the news that we have like aged like a couple years or so from being in the pandemic. I wanted to really hear from you all's perspective, like what's the validity to that? How has that changed us?
I mean, I'll start if you have something.
Sure.
I think one of the things that the pandemic has done with us is allowed us to be within ourselves, forced us to sit with ourselves, because oftentimes we live a fast life because we avoid a lot of things. And the last 2 years, we had to really sit with ourselves, and unfortunately, some of us didn't like what we sat with, you know, or in some cases, don't even know who we were sitting with because we're always running to do something else instead of really taking care of ourselves. And I really do think that, as they say, pandemic's over. I really don't see that because I feel like we're going to be faced with a great deal of the aftermath for a few more years.
Absolutely.
Right. Because of the anxiety, the depression.
Yes.
Not only that, we don't even know who was living with who at the time as far as trauma was concerned. Right. Even our youth. So we're looking at having to constantly, I think, be prepared for what this is going to look like for the next 10 years.
I am seeing some of that now. I work at Garfield Park Hospital for kids, and the kids 5, 6, 7 who were at home during the pandemic, they cannot function in a social setting. First day they go to school, they have to be sassed. This person is disruptive. This person have anger issue, and this is their first time leaving home because when it was time for them to leave home, they were home. So at 5 and 6, they do not know how to function. So you're seeing it already in that age group. I think mentally we're still there. We're not over this yet.
And when you talk about, you know, the question you asked, if we, in a sense, we feel like we've either aged, I feel like a lot of people feel like they've lost time, right? Like, we have people who were going through major transitions through those 2 years that they kind of missed out on. She spoke about the younger kids, but like I work with college students and high school students, and so some of them, you know, lost out on prom, the things that they've looked forward to for a big chunk of their life. People who had plans to get married and had to move their weddings, and sometimes that didn't even happen because the other stuff came out, right? So a lot of people suffer different levels of loss and grief of losing moments that they had looked forward to their entire lives. You know, even going into college, right? Like you look forward to that freshman year, and a lot of people had to stay home, especially those. I feel for those who were looking forward to a sense of an escape, and the pandemic kind of took that away from them, right? So if you're struggling at home and you're like, I can't wait to go to college, which a lot of kids feel regardless if you know if it's trauma or not, but like to know that you have to now have to stay at home and you don't know how long that's going to last. I think that was something that brought up anxiety in us, is like we didn't have an end date for this. You know, we didn't know when things were going to start to open back up. So the unknown in itself brings a lot of anxiety, as well as what she mentioned as far as just social anxiety. Now we're seeing that a lot. Even people who were very maybe extroverted before the pandemic now are struggling and trying to figure out, how do I reintegrate into these social spaces, and how do I show myself authentically, you know, sometimes even without drugs, without alcohol, like how do I show up as me?
And
now
is it safe too?
Right.
Outside of those other forces of, you know, just going out and hanging out, like we in Chicago, you know, like amazing city, always something to do in Chicago. And although these spaces have opened back up, we were just shut down and told not to go to these spaces for the last 2.5 years, you know, and you have to go with masks, but then there's this debate on television all across the country because every state is doing something completely different. So it's just, you know, from what I've experienced personally, as well as individuals that I've encountered, is just it's exacerbated issues that weren't as prevalent or as known to them. Like they didn't have social anxiety before, but now they do. Because am I gonna go in here and the person that coughs because they choked on their water that I do often, do they have COVID and am I gonna die now? You know,
or pass it on to somebody else who I care
and like
about.
It's literally like you said, like there's no end, and there's supposedly, you know, supposed to be endemic. That's when we're at the end of this, you know, and that nobody's talked about that because we're not at the end of it. We're still somewhat in the thick of it because every time we cut on the news, there's another 0.0, 0.4, point something of COVID or of some sort of something that could potentially kill you, you know, or keep you coughing. RSV, you know, it's not killing you, but it's keeping you coughing. But then you have individuals now who are anxious and scared to go outside or scared germaphobes that maybe we're not as
hyper aware
as they are now. Exactly. So individuals are way more hyper vigilant to things. Like I appreciate now, like, you know, I don't have to worry about somebody on my neck at Walgreens when I'm putting my $2 in because it's that little sign behind me now. But individuals who will they even go to these spaces, you know, to live their lives? A lot of people are still, even though they can come outside, are not coming outside.
And not only that, it's the side of it that we don't see, the psychological. There's a lot of people who lost loved ones on their last days. You can't see them because the hospital will not allow you. So imagine losing your mom, your dad, and you cannot be there for them because, quote unquote, it's COVID. So psychologically, we're still in this pandemic. We're not out
and
of
we
this.
have to consider the systemic pieces that we're still feeling right now. And when I say systemic, I mean like the factories, production, you know, flight prices, housing market, all of these other things that when we look at people psychologically, we usually try to look at it from a psychosocial, emotional, you know, so that involves the systems in which we belong to. So when we look at the fact that eggs are still, you know, eggs are expensive as hell right now. You know, we had that period of time where gas was crazy. You know what I mean?
Chickens got Louis bags.
That's what I'm saying. Flights were out of control. Those are all outside influences that we still feel directly because again, like if flights are crazy and you live on the opposite side of the country from your family, that puts you in further isolation or deprivation of like community or feeling close to the people that you love. You know, if you trying to figure out how to pay for your groceries, or if your unemployment getting ready to run out, you know what I mean? Now, how can I focus on my mental or my emotional health? I'm surviving right now. Like a lot of people are still in survival mode because we are still feeling these effects of the systems around us. Like, and that in itself just, again, anxiety. We don't know if the president getting ready to cancel these loans. Like, we don't know what benefits are coming. Like,
loan, are they coming back?
That's what I'm saying. Like, in the midst of this, we got a whole new president. Like, we just, there's a lot that we just can't
Listen, Joe, if you're listening, bring them PPPs back. Okay.
But to the point where you got people praising Trump because they like, Trump was in here getting stuff done during the pandemic. But the benefits are leaving and people are still struggling.
And the prices are still high.
And not only that, but the job. Let's just talk about how the jobs are not even in a place of working with people. Like all of a sudden you were working from home. Now all of a sudden, oh no, I need you here every day. There was no transition. It was like as soon as it was said like, oh, pandemic is over, I need you here Monday through Friday. What about the child care that they have to take care of, making sure the kids, like there are so many other things that is placed on top of what we had to go through the pandemic, that all we're trying to do is function in an unfunctional space.
And I will say that I'm sorry. There are some positives that we are seeing coming out of that pandemic too. You know what I mean? Like the fact that now we do have a culture of work from home in spaces that didn't have it before. You know what I mean? So like a lot of people are benefiting from that. It's allowed people to save a little gas money. It's allowed people to save on child care. You know, we're seeing this in our inner circles and we're seeing it from people that, you know, from clients and things of that nature. Like I can say now as a therapist, I get to work with so many more people because now they're not worried about proximity, right? They can hop on a telehealth call, on a video, you know, they can hop on the phone with me and not have to fight insurance to prove why I should have been able to do that in the first place. So now, you know, I don't have to worry about the fact that, oh, I'd love to see you, but I know you live an hour away and now I can't serve you. So like, on top of being able to, for things to be a little bit more accessible, a little bit more comfortable for people, the pandemic did its job on separating people from things that were not serving them, whether that be relationships, whether that be jobs, you know what I mean? It pushed people into their purpose. I've never heard more people talk about the fact that they picked up a skill or they started a business, you know, hobby, other than that period of time, because like she said, it gave us time to sit with ourselves. It gave us time to really evaluate, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? And if the world ends tomorrow, how am I going to walk out of this earth feeling like what did I get? What am I here for? So I think it gave people a little push in their purpose and in their passions that we maybe wouldn't have got if people didn't have to sit down for that period of time.
And it causes more people to seek mental health care.
Absolutely.
Yes. Everyone realized
I think a lot
that
of that came from too, because within the last 3 years, the prevalence of mental health care, commercials about medication, commercials about mental health with people that look like me, you know, or look like somebody that I know, or is speaking a language that I'm aware of. Now I'm at home at 3 o'clock and this commercial is on, and these commercials are running because, you know, I don't have cable. I'm straight, you know, Fire Stick, Roku, whatever, Doobie, like Flexbox, you know, and they still have commercials. So I've even seen it, you know, the fact that mental health is more prevalent, but it's also, you know, what I've seen with me influencing on Instagram and social media and things like that is, you know, there's that fine line between, you know, mental health care and self-care and things like that, and when it's real and when it's just a fad, it's just the buzzword. It's the buzzword for this week, you know, that sort of thing. But when we were at home and we really were sitting with ourselves and really having to evaluate and say, hey, do I need some help? Because I've been married to my husband for 20 years, and
you're getting on my nerves.
Now I'm with him every hour of the day. You know, when I was gone for 80 hours or 40 hours out the week. Now I'm home with these 40 hours, or I am with myself in my house for 40 hours out the week, and I'm working here, and you know, especially I'm single, no kids. I have a beautiful dog. His name is Scuba Steve. You know, I'm sitting with my dog, but that was a lot for me too, because it's like my home was my safe place for a very long period of time, and now home is work too. So how do I disconnect from this single household, you know, and working, and then also having to deal with too, I wasn't necessarily considered essential, because there were individuals that weren't considered essential that still worked.
Okay, the admissions counselors. We was at work. Who's coming to college?
Education. It was people that didn't get any kickback or real praise that still had to work and deal with the same fears of dying. Literally, that's really what it comes down to.
I would like to throw a monkey wrench in here. Can we throw in seasonal depression?
Yes.
Cause I be depressed already, and then now y'all gonna tell me I can't leave to come out the house? Like, I just thought I was gonna die, like, or would have rather
really
low key.
What it came down to was like, you know, COVID was death. That's all it was.
I was so scared.
I'm gonna die if I go outside. And you know, individuals who live with, because I've lived with and been diagnosed with like agoraphobia. I'm verbatim knowing if I walk out the door, I'm gonna die. You know, and now you're adding something that's in my face every single day on top of this president and people storming the Capitol when I thought that you couldn't do that. Like, you was gonna die. You know, all these things. I mean, in the dead of quarantine, you have George Floyd going on. You have these protests, and we're in one of the big cities where they're protesting in our city.
Well, here's the thing, though, and playing devil's advocate, all of this has always been going on.
Yes, it is.
It's not like, oh, you know what? It just started happening.
The pandemic exacerbated everything.
It
exacerbated. When you talk about like your, you know, depression symptoms and anxiety, like it just brought everything out. Things that again we avoid, that lie under the surface, or that we kind of ignore, or we've normalized it, and then it's like, again, now you're sitting there thinking, what are we doing?
And everybody was using the term, it's a lot going on.
It's a lot going on.
And these unprecedented times.
Unprecedented times, yes.
Baby, if I never hear unprecedented times again, I would be so lucky.
Word that everybody picked up. Real. See, it was different from me during COVID because I had to go to work.
Yeah.
There were parents who still leave all three of their kids at the hospital so they can take vacation. So I had to go to work. I see it. So my fear of COVID was different because deep down, a part of me, I still believe a part of it is fake. Because what you hear in the news and what you see in the hospital is quite different. So they're like, oh, it's to put fear. And we all know fear brings anxiety. But when you're seeing something different from what is being told to you, now you start really thinking, what's the purpose? So my perspective is quite different. I did everything I used to do. I love being by myself. So now I get the opportunity to be by myself. I was in heaven. But for the people who don't, because of all this fear, I have so many patients that medication was not working, therapy was not working, because just like you, they felt, I'm going to go to the gas station, I'm going to touch this pump, and I'm going to die. And I'm like,
Because
how
not
can I
enough
tell you you're not
information.
going to die?
Because not enough information was put
Not
out
enough.
there.
It was
Like,
specific what they wanted us to know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it's like you leave people with, now I'm by myself, I'm in my space. I really don't know what's going on. My anxiety is already high. My depression is already high. Matter of fact, I have unresolved loss because I couldn't go to grandma and grandpa's funeral. And you're not giving me enough information to even be able to feel like I have some control over what's going on in my space.
And the news
Hopelessness.
be lying half the time.
Yes.
On top of that.
I promise you, there's people I witnessed with my eye were not work a particular day, and somehow their COVID test come back positive. So when you see stuff like that, you're like, nah, ain't no way. That's something I see for myself. So my perspective is quite different.
I want to know something. So during the pandemic, I went through a deep, harsh breakup. And I stopped listening to music. You laughing. I'm glad to be over there now. Okay,
I was
we
stifling my little
All right.
laugh. I was stifling my
Let me tell you something. Is it normal for people to stop? Well, I feel like, yeah, it's normal for people to stop doing what they really love when they're depressed.
It's the first thing that goes.
Right.
And that's what I have to
Anhedonia.
remind
You
clients is like, right now, I like to describe depression as like this big monster, right? That likes to sit on you.
Yeah.
And like the more you feed it, right, which is doing what it
Heavier
tells you
it
to do.
gets.
You don't need to get up and go to bed. Like, I mean, you don't need to wake up and like wash up. You should just stay in the bed all day. Like, no, you don't watch that movie or that video that's gonna make you happy. Go put on something sad. Like, don't do what you normally enjoy, because it's not gonna help no way. Like, it puts these seeds of doubt in your head about your ability to do and overcome. And so the more you give into your symptoms, the more they take over, and you don't do anything to work against or to challenge or to help yourself or to allow others to help you, it just gets heavier. And so the first thing that I tell people to do is, like, when you're feeling that way, don't pull away from what usually makes you feel good, because those are the things that keep you going. Those are the things that give you, that's what you have to lean into. But it just goes against, usually, of course, with depression, we see a lack of energy. We see difficulty, like, or with anxiety, difficulty concentrating, just a lack of interest in most things. And so it's very easy to do nothing. But sometimes when you talk about like really not letting depression like sink you, it's tapping in with that self of saying, like, even if it's the minimum, like, I'm gonna do just a little bit today. And I can be proud of myself for doing just a little bit, because what people don't realize is, like, when you give in to those depressive symptoms and you allow them to get worse and get worse and get worse and not do anything about it, then you end up feeling guilty about the fact that you're not doing anything, right? Most people who are used to being up and productive and, doing music or whatever their passions are, that sits in the back of their head, like, you ain't picked up a pen, you ain't you ain't went outside, and so that just makes you feel worse.
And that goes right in ties with seasonal affective disorder. This is why people who live in places like Chicago, you're not outside anymore. Fall comes, now you're lazy, you're tired, you have no energy, you're oversleeping, you're craving carbs. That's what depression is. That's exactly what depression is. So it's tough for the state.
I describe it, especially seasonal affective disorder, like when I'm teaching in my classes. is, you know, it affects your ability to live, laugh, love, and learn. When it affects those L's, it's a problem. You know, like and people don't think like, you know, I'm still getting up and going to work, but what do you normally do? Like, do you normally stop and get a coffee and now you're not going? Or do you normally like hang out an extra hour after work and do this? That's your normal life and you're not doing those things. You know?
could also be going through the motions and still do all those things.
Absolutely.
And I feel like
That's not living, though.
I feel like
Right, is that living?
have been running on autopilot. Not gonna lie. I mean, not necessarily right now in this space. I really had to dig myself out of there, which is why we're even on this podcast right now. Like folks who know I've been waiting on opportunities, talking about and doing stuff, or wanting to put other people first before me. But like, I think when you're depressed, you lose what you love. And that's a pun right there.
And that's another thing.
That
When
is
you're
a pun.
depressed, when you are depressed, at first you don't want to recognize that you're depressed.
No, not at all.
You know, so what you're going to start doing is lying to yourself. You're going to say, no, I'm not staying in the bed. I just really want to sleep. I've been working so hard. I've been tired. And then before you actually begin to realize, I'm not living now. I'm just functioning, and I'm not even functioning. I don't even have a balance right now.
I'm just doing things because I have to do it. I have to. I can't. You know, and that sometimes some people aren't even able to do that. There's people who get themselves in debt, and you know, I mean, hoarders. You got hoarders. People getting kicked out of their homes because they haven't been able to get up and go to work to do it that living aspect of things. And a lot of it is stigma because you know we use depression and we use bipolar, just those words so freely.
It's
that
crazy.
You know, we live in the Midwest, for instance. How many times have you heard, man, this weather is so bipolar? And that, you know, that's stigmatizing language too, because bipolar disorder does not look like the sun is out and then it's snowing the next day. Not all the time. It doesn't look that way. And we talk about depression as it being such a negative thing when all of us experience it. At some point, there's some periods of depression. You have people that will experience periods of depression and never experience them again, maybe. Or they could be situational.
Especially when you lose a loved one.
Exactly. You lose a loved one. Or individuals where it truly is a chemical imbalance. You know, as to why they're experiencing. It has nothing to do with who they are as a person.
No.
You know, things. And because we stigmatize this language, especially in the Black community. We stigmatize these languages. We stigmatize depression. We stigmatize bipolar and things like that as crazy, or you just need to pray about it and things of that nature.
In our culture, everything is pray about it. God will make, so we minimize it and we don't accept it, so we're stuck in this.
And not only that, because
forever.
I know what you're going to say, or I know how you're going to say it, I'm
Are
not
you
even
gonna
going to have
treat
a
me?
conversation with you because you're going to already make me feel worse. Because now I don't get that God is going to help me. I don't get the prayer is going to work because I've been praying every day, and guess what? I'm still feeling the same way.
I always say, like, you could be praying about it and God is leading you to come and speak with the individuals, you know, and to sit in these offices and talk. It might be a medication situation. God help that person's brain to be able to develop the medication that's going to help you.
That's how you pray there.
Exactly. So you got, it's almost like, are you praying and already looking for a specific answer? You know, and like I've taught a lot of my classes, mental health first aid, and certified a lot of individuals with a colleague of mine, and she's holistic, and she's faith-based, you know, and her and I come together because we're both like, you know, hey, you know, praying about is good. I believe in God.
Mental health and a higher power can coexist.
They can coexist.
And this is where you always have to ask, what are your expectations?
Exactly.
Because if you're praying and think, oh, I'm depressed today, and tomorrow I'm going to wake up not depressed,
exactly.
you have an unrealistic expectation.
And a misunderstanding of how mental illnesses work or how mental health disorders work, you know. And that's one thing that I try to educate people on, so that way we aren't continuing to misuse words or diminish the value of certain words because they mean something for those who live with those things. So like, even when we think about depression, right, I have to tell people that sometimes, and I had to learn this, that sometimes we just have slow seasons, right? And it doesn't need, we're so used to go. Sometimes we have slow seasons. I know for me, the winter is my slower season. So I have to be a bit more patient and graceful with myself. I may not get up and go to the gym like I did in the spring and in the summer. I may have lapses of not feeling really motivated. I may end up deciding that, you know, I'm gonna eat a little more because I like my comfort food in the winter months, you know what I mean? I'm going to stay indoors indoors because I don't like the cold in Chicago. So I'm not going to be popping out like I used to over the summer. And that's okay because I also use those seasons as a reset. I use those seasons to slow down, and I appreciate that. But I can understand the difference in that and me being like, oh, I feel like I've done a slight 180 from the summertime, so I'm depressed. No, this is just a different season for me. And we all need to be able to sometimes identify what those are and not put so much pressure on ourselves because we're showing up different in a different part of
That's
the
how
year.
people get misdiagnosed.
We interrupt this broadcast to tell you about an event that just might bless your life. CLJ Counseling Services presents Time for You to Shine, a conference that gives women the opportunity to unite and develop a community of empowerment and healing. Guest speakers include Michelle McKinney, Takiana McGee, Tracy Redmond, Jasmine Mack, and your host, Elaine Smith. It's all going down at the Tinley Park Convention Center, March 11th from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get your tickets now at axcare.org. That's ACTSCARE.org. And don't miss this experience. Unwind and awaken your senses with down-to-earth candles. You can choose from 8-ounce or 16-ounce premium coconut soy candles that shimmer as they burn. My favorite scents are Self-Care, which is a lavender sage, Cushion OJ, and their newest scent, Peach Nectar. Listeners of the Vicki Street Show can save by entering promo code STREET15 for 15% off your order. Head on over to downtoearthcandles.com and follow their Instagram at DTE Candles to get your aromatic fix.
You have to change the definition of productivity and add rest in there.
Yeah,
because I think for the way society has set us up, it was like, you got to go to work, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to keep moving, and if you sit down, you're lazy. I'm not lazy, I'm resting.
Because not having rest to make you crazy.
It's funny because it's so cultural.
Yeah.
Because I came here from Jamaica where it was about family. You go to school, you go home, you chill. Everybody come to America for a better life. I come here and I realize, yes, you can make money, but are you happy?
Yes.
No, you're not happy. So it's not all about money. So you have to realize this go. I stopped that really quick. You have to have a good work-life balance because if you work, when you die, you're going to be 70, retire, have nothing.
And I think we need to elaborate on that balance because some people expect like a 50-50 split. And it's not a 50-50 split all the time. Sometimes you need to give 65 to your life and let this be a little bit lesser. And sometimes, you know what, that might need to be 50 this time or 55. It's just being able to know when to shift in order to fit what your need is in the moment.
For you.
Right.
And
some of those shifts, again, like nothing is ever permanent, right? So it's like sometimes I understand, like let's say you're trying to get a promotion or you're trying to roll out a business. You may push the 80% on the job or the career side or, of what you're trying to pursue. But again, I always tell clients that that's not sustainable long term. So don't go into it thinking like, oh, I can bust my ass like this for 6 months and not be burnt out. No, let's talk about realistically, right? Let's talk realistically how much you should put the fire under you and how long, and then is that goal attainable within that within a reasonable time frame so that you don't end up on the other side of that
burnt
feeling like I done worked all of this and I don't even enjoy it or whatever the case may be.
Recognizing too, like you said, like when you need rest and when you need to pour into yourself, because I am when I say I'm radical about self-love and self-care, it's because everything that you do starts with you.
Absolutely.
You cannot give, regardless of, especially being an artist, being a musician or an artist, you need to, your craft is you. If you are not whole, if you are not rested, if your brain is not ready, there's no blank slate there for you to create, how do you pour into your craft and then benefit from it? So it's like, if you take that rest so that way you can start over. And it's trust, it is easier said than done, and I'm coming, it definitely does. And being in corporate America, I've been in corporate America for way too long, you know, and quit my first job in July, mainly because I had to finally be like, hey, no, I'm done. I'm done with this because this is not serving me. I've done everything I've needed to do in terms of therapy, medication, you know, things of this nature to better myself, and something still ain't right. And this is one of the things I know is driving me crazy, you know, for lack of a better word. And literally did that, and so much changed positively. Coming off of medication, you know, things like that.
People are scared of change.
People are scared of change. And, you know, we talked about fear, and I was taught long time ago, I think prior to my undergraduate degree, is, you know, fear, false expectations appearing as reality, and a lot of that is what anxiety is.
Yes.
You're never really anxious about the positives. You're anxious about all the ways that positive things is going to go wrong.
Yes.
You're in this negative spiral, and you become hyper vigilant. You're trying to, and a lot of times I consider myself somebody who's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Anxiety is my superpower at this point, because I have my coping mechanisms. I know, you know, how to prepare to get here. Like we mentioned, I had my charger, I had my externals, you know, like, because if we get stranded, we're good, you know. So I was able to channel that into this in order for me to leave the house. Especially in what's going on right now. Because I was this way, you know, preparing prior to COVID. So when COVID happened, I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm in the house. I got all the things I need. Like, everything is delivery now. Cool. I've been waiting on this to happen. But, like, in a lot of scenarios, it's just you're not looking at it that way. And you really, truly need to be radical about yourself. And because if you don't take your rest, and me and Vicki had this conversation a lot when she would be stressed out about a deadline that she created herself. And I'm like, Vicki, you can move that deadline at any point. It's your deadline.
You preaching now.
Right? It's your deadline. You can move. Yes, you had a goal to get, but look at you. You stressing out. You're not performing well here.
Self-care.
You're freaked out. You're not prepared. There's so many things. You are about to lose it. You can move that deadline 2 days to get what you need, because it's yours. Looking at it that way, pour into yourself, and self-care is important. Self-care isn't always just, oh, I'm going out with my girls to brunch, or I'm going to get my nails done, because I do get my nails done as a part of self-care. I'm going out to get my nails done. I'm going to get a facial. That's not always what self-care is. Self-care can be taking 10 extra minutes.
Stop pushing yourself.
Look, we read on the way over here that about 70% of musicians suffer from some mental health disorder.
That's true.
So as we sit at the table with a bunch of therapists and clinicians, what would you all say? What would be the advice for some of these artists that they need to do while knowing that they have deadlines to maintain and they have to create on the spot? What can they do?
Organize.
Have grace and compassion.
Yes,
give grace and compassion.
Grace was exactly what I'm. Be gentle with yourself.
And one of the things she said is organize. And one of the things that I really work with people on, especially when it comes to anxiety, that may show up when it's time to like spit something at the drop of a hat, or you just you have a deadline to meet, and you may have habits of procrastinating. Organization and preparation you're going to be your best friend when you have to when you are in positions where you are constantly put on the spot or you have to deliver, right? Practicing and knowing like what's coming ahead. So if you know like this is something I have to get used to, like even though I do this now and I'm okay, when I used to have to public speak, like starting in high school, my nerves, I'd be there with a paper shaking, right? And the older I got and I knew, I was like, I want to talk to people, right? I want to be a speaker. I want to be on podcasts and, you know, all of these different platforms. And it took me to harness my anxiety, learning those skills that she talked about, as well as like preparing myself for what I could be asked, what we may talk about, and the confidence in being myself. So I think when you have confidence in your skill set, you can deliver. You know, it's just not letting your mind convince you that it's going to be something that, you know, I ain't never did this before. Usually, you've met a deadline before. You've had to, you know,
you've been in this space.
You've been in this space, and when it's your first time, of course, there's bumps and bruises along the way, even your first few times. But after a while, so much of like your confidence and what you are bringing to the table is going to override any potential mistakes that you think you could make.
There's something I notice based on the clients that I have, the research that I've done. Most people who are artists, whether it's a rapper, a painter, a sculptor, struggle with some form of mental illness. with mental illness, the neurotransmitters, they work differently. And I've seen a lot of creative ideas that come from people during a manic phase, or they write a most beautiful song when they're depressed. So we all see mental illness as so negative. There's so much positive towards it because people who struggle are always so creative. And if we accept it, who knows? One day I could get depressed and I could create the most beautiful song that sells 1 million. You just never know. So we just have to embrace it, work with it, and just understand what is going on with us.
It sounds so cliche, but it's true when they say like, you're not alone. You know, because you never ask for help and just speak out. Like, talk about how you're feeling. You know, I know, 6 years ago before I grew in this space, it was looking for help. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm going to see a therapist and I'm talking to a psychiatrist, but there's nobody that looks like me that's talking like this and like that feels this way, right? And so it was like, soon as I started talking out, and I first started, in a social media platform that I didn't invite nobody to, and it was just like, if you found me, you found me. But as soon as it was like, this is me, this is who I am, and this was my only account, and everybody knew it was me. It was like, oh my God, and I'm getting DMs. I feel this way. I felt this way. You're not alone. You're like, oh my God, why isn't people talking about it? It's because of the stigma that they're in the negative.
And it's cultural.
We
were told not to talk about it.
No.
And not only that, but
be strong.
Yes. We're taught to be independent in a toxic level.
Yes.
That I need to figure out how to take care of myself and do these things by myself. And the thing you said, you can't. All of like the anxiety, the depression, we're sitting here trying to figure out how to manage these things by ourselves when all you have to do is ask people who can help you and be like, wait a minute, let me hold your hand and let me help you see how we can work this out for you. And another thing that we have to really stop doing is this self-care piece of comparing and contrasting. Because how are you taking care of yourself? Are you asking me because you want to know, or are you asking me to try to tell me what I should be doing? When really it's supposed to be based on me as a person. Because when we can start looking at us, ourselves as a person, and what we're dealing with, we can then be able to reach out and be like, help me to get to my point B.
It's not a competition. Like, that's why I've, like, the last year or 2 years, I've really been looking at social media and mental health. Like, this is a fad now. Everybody's talking about it.
I promise you.
Are you talking about it to be seen?
So here's what's going on.
Everybody got depression and anxiety.
No. Everybody have
ADHD
now.
That too. And everybody's a narcissist. And all of these other things.
There's the education world. You can Google anything. And when you start reading everything, I promise you, you're going to say, that's me or everyone in my family.
Then when you're Googling it, you're Googling something that little Joe Brown.
Exactly.
We teach it as the red Corvette syndrome, because when you first get a car and you get a car, it's a red Corvette, and then you pull it off the lot, you see a red Corvette, you're gonna start seeing it now, right?
So then it's
like you start thinking like, oh, everybody has, or they got ADHD, or they got. It's just you're just recognizing, and it's signs and symptoms. A lot of people exhibit. Just because I'm crying doesn't mean I'm depressed.
Sad, right?
Just because I'm shaking doesn't mean I'm having a panic attack. I could very well be having a heart attack right now. You don't know what it could be, and like you said, with it being trending, and it's scary for our youth right now. It's so
tough.
Scary when it comes to mental health on social media right now.
No, because everyone is saying they have this and they have that. There's a back order in Adderall.
And they're saying it because of a TikTok that they saw where this girl went through all of her symptoms, and because I relate to that, I must be ADHD. And my thing is, I'm all for people being empowered by learning about something that they may be going through and knowing that they're not alone, or that there's a name for it, right? Because sometimes you just think like, I don't know what's going on with me, and then you learn and you go, but let's talk to the professionals about it. There is a lot of self-diagnosing going on. And one thing I will say, to counter that piece is sometimes it has to be a longer or a lifelong sort of journey of you learning. Like, because I'm not going to sit here and say that sometimes people don't get misdiagnosed, right? So you may think you have one thing and then you find out later on. So like sometimes when I will trust a client who say like, yeah, I've been in therapy since I was 12. I've seen this many therapists. This is the psychiatrist that I see. This is the medication I'm on. I have a regimen going, and these have been my diagnosis. I trust you.
Right.
Because you've done a lot of research on yourself up until this point, until you met me. You know what I mean? So let's collaborate on like, because the best, I feel like the best client is the client who has a opening into themselves, right? They can see in themselves, they have a bit of self-awareness of like what's going on. But again, like sometimes that comes from battling a mental health issue, not having all the answers for a long time, and then you finally get to a place where you like, okay, I know I've taken these meds, I know this med work, this med don't work, this med gives me this side effect, I know that I respond better to DBT over CBT, you know what I mean? Like you're helping me help you. So like there is, like I say, there is a certain level of empowerment that people feel when, you know, they've been going through something for so long and they learn about a name, but then it can also be very dangerous when we're just internalizing so much of what we see online and adopting that because we want to feel seen.
I want to say to
accepted.
that regard, representation matters.
A lot.
For sure. And as we wrap up the show, I want to be someone to be a face and have someone relate to them.
Right.
Some years ago, I was going through some things. The folks at this table know. And I was going through some things so much at my job, it required me to have to go seek out a therapist. I went and sought out a therapist, thought I was just a cool person. This is how I live my life. Therapist was like, I'm finna send you to somebody else to make sure what I think is what's going on. Long story short, came back, manic bipolar, depression, disorder. And I'm like, me? Not me. Even my mama was like, no, not you. You ain't got that. We could pray it away type shit. You know how the gospel folks be. And it's like, I was also told that's one of the disorders in the Black community it goes under the rug. Like everybody, a lot of people.
It's a lot more common than people.
You feel me?
Yeah, you see it every day.
And what I'm trying to do is just like relate it for my artists, because I mentioned earlier in the show, like when you're going through something, do you stop doing what you love?
No.
It really wasn't until I went through a breakup where it got me to the point where now I gotta be on meds. I was doing behavioral therapy, but it's like what me and you Tene was discussing in the car is like you can go through your whole life with having a disorder and not knowing until something traumatic happens. And it could be that this pandemic has happened, and now that's why so many people are going to therapists because things are coming out. You done went crazy in the crib, and I stopped listening to music, but I started writing my own music. My therapist, Elaine, right here, she told me she always gives me homework, and she's like, I want you to write a song about how you feel. I ended up writing a tripping song about how I felt. I ended up writing a big mental health song, Chasing Trains, talking about FMLA ain't gotta cost 4 months of my sanity. Talking about I'm on some lithium and sedatives, like I'm better than that mind crack. Like ain't gotta play the game to kick it with them Anglo Sax. Like if you ain't heard Chasing Trains, I really think that you will relate to it as a person who has just had a long day, and then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And so before we wrap up the show, I want to know, what did you all either do during the pandemic to just keep that happiness and spirit alive, or who were some artists that you digested during that time? I'll start with you, Britt.
Okay. So earlier we talked about, depression and employment and all the factors that go around with that. And, I put out content about like, are you really depressed or do you just hate your job? Because I went through, I went through a period
every day.
at the right before
That be why we depressed.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Like so much of that stuff is it can be situational, right? But that was huge for me at the beginning of the pandemic, because when I tell you, we talked about spirituality and how they can coexist. I knew that God had something better for me, and I also knew that I was struggling, and I had to figure out, how do I like keep my shit together until he opens that next door. And so when I tell you about God's timing and I speak about his blessings, like I really mean it, because February 2020, I was fired from that job. Never been fired from a job in my life. People don't talk about being fired, right? Like as a therapist, like working in a mental health space. Like, what do you mean? You know, wrongfully at that, right? But it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it thrusted me full time into private practice. This happened in February. The world shut down in March.
Right.
I would have had to work that whole pandemic as a what were they calling it? The necessary workers. Like I wouldn't have the essential workers. I wouldn't have had a choice. Like I would have been exposed, you know. And here I am, like kind of bummed that I'm unemployed for a little bit, right? And then I look up and the rest of the world is sitting at home with me. So
Trust the process.
outside of that, like being able to really develop what I want in my life to look like and to be free from sometimes that 9-to-5 life that really may not serve people. That was a groundbreaking moment for me. And I took a lot from what I learned over those next, 2 years to the point where like now I'm 3 years out of that. And it is crazy how much I've been able to accomplish since then. So like when we talk about, what helped me during the pandemic, it was fostering what I knew I could do. It was putting, the ideas that I had, I wrote a lot of my book in that pandemic, so putting all those ideas that I had in my head or I had in my notes and allowing them to flourish and put them into fruition because now I have the time to do that. I have a little bit of the resources to do that, so not letting that, I didn't want to come out of that pandemic and being like, what do I have to show for it, right? Like some people, they just wanted to survive. And there were days where I felt like that, like I'm just glad I'm waking up, but then I was also like very, I've always been a very goal-oriented person. I'm like, I want to have something to show for this part of my life. If I already have had to sit down and miss out on, potential opportunities or, fun or whatever, like let's use this to the best of my ability. So when we talk about artists, I'm a big R&B head. Like R&B kind of moves me. Like, of course, I love my rap and my hip hop, but like I still listen to stuff that came out in the early 2000s, like those artists. I feel like music during that time was also really valuable because, we couldn't, I feel like music is one of those things that bring people together. So you used to being at parties or clubs and like, being collectively together. It was people dancing in their house because music is what made them feel close to one another. Like it put them in a good mood. It give you a vibe, and I don't think that that's something that could ever be replaced. So
you got any songs or artists you was listening to that helped bring the spirit alive in you?
I love me some Summer Walker. I love me some SZA, baby. When SZA dropped that Control, like, and she talked about all of those different transitions, like, or those feelings that she had, and at that point in my life, I was still feeling that, like being in that similar age group and like knowing what it's like to, experience heartbreak or feeling like, you're getting older, but are you really getting older? Like things of that nature. I felt really connected to. I love me some Janae, like just being on that peaceful vibe. Like those are the artists I tend to lean into because not only do I feel like seen and heard by them, but I love a good vibe.
Okay. Tene, give me who you was listening to.
Man, who was I listening to? I'm always listening to Erykah Badu.
Like, that's a good one.
That's, I always say I'm part unicorn, part Erykah Badu. So, Erykah Badu get me through some 4-Leaf Clover, Next Lifetime, on and on. Like, those is my, top. Erykah Badu, definitely neo-soul. I mean, Summer Walker, you can't go wrong with Summer Walker. Yeah. Janae came out with some fire. Janae has that.
She had that
she has that. Yes, she has the element and energy about her that it's healing. It's healing. It's such a healing energy. So I definitely was on Janae during the pandemic, like when we was straight locked down, because that was my opportunity to, because I was still working, and that was my opportunity to really pour into Selfie Connoisseur. And because everybody was scrolling all day long, to really create content that spoke to everybody, that spoke to life, that really just created a deeper following of individuals, on social media. I'm considered a micro influencer, you know, so although I'm not at the tens of thousands yet, you know, the individuals that's there, they feel like family. So I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people I've never met a day in my life, different walks of life, that were going through things that my slogan, you know, of course, is I'm here. Anybody, you can talk to me about anything. I don't care if I've ever met you a day, but if you need somebody to talk to, I am there to listen without judgment, you know, and it allowed me to create that space for individuals. And then to be joyful, to follow up, saying, man, you're thriving right now in life. You know, I can see, because I remember back in March 2020 and July 2020 when we thought we was getting off punishment and didn't get off punishment, where we, you know, but yeah, that time period, it was a lot of music that was going on. I always tend to create a Spotify playlist and just let it kind of curate itself after I've liked so many songs, you know, and Janae and Summer Walker, Ari Lennox, definitely. Shea Butter was definitely on my list during that time frame. So.
Period. Miss Elaine, what was you listening to?
Whew, okay, so you know I'm a thick girl, so it was definitely Lizzo. But yeah, I definitely was listening to Lizzo, and another artist I was listening to was NF. And the reason why I listened to the both of them is if you listen to the lyrics, you can hear them talk about a lot of what they were going through. Especially NF, with him talking about like his experience and like how he was motivating himself to get through, and you know, how he allowed his anxiety and his OCD to be the force for him to move through his fear. And I think during the pandemic, I think that's a lot of what I was doing. It was moving through the fear. I was doing the same thing. I was working a job and was like working a job full time and working my practice half time, and then still trying to take care of my family. And then I wasn't listening to the voice of God telling me, I put you in this position to get away from that position.
Yeah. Time to transition.
Yep. And so at some point I found my courage. And it's so funny that one of NF's song is motivation that I kind of kept on replay during this time. Is I found my courage to let go of that job and put myself in a position to flourish with my business. And even though at that time I was going through a great deal of transition, I was like, I cannot be afraid anymore. I have to find my voice. I have to be who I'm supposed to be. And I have to remain authentic of who I am, because I want my person who's sitting in front of me to be authentic. So I am the cussing therapist. I ain't did none today. You know what I'm saying? But normally that's who I am. And I had to get comfortable and be confident in that. And I think I have developed a new person at this point.
Absolutely. And you sent me some of NF's music too.
Absolutely.
So, and I added it to the positive reinforcement playlist. So yes. And then we have Miss Ivy, Dr. Ivy. Who were you listening to?
Man, my music go with my mood.
So you was turning up?
All the time. So music for me is a coping mechanism. It's reassuring. Going to work, tired, fatigue, seasonal affective, not motivated. Of course, I'm going to play some Bounty Killer, some Beanie Man, Baby Sham, get the vibes going. Come home at night, I'm going to go to my Bob Marley, my Gregory Isaac, Night Nurse is my favorite song. Home, cleaning up. No, I'm going to do the J. Cole, the Miguel.
Okay,
so
okay.
On a Sunday, I'll give you Kenny Rogers. I love good written music with melody. I like something that teaches me something. Not that I don't like the nowadays stuff, because I'm so caught up in the older stuff. I barely listen to the nowadays stuff. So my music, it just dependent on the season, the mood, what is going on with me. So I use music to cope.
I love that. Hearing what the therapists and the mental health professionals use to just boost their spirit. And all of that will be on our playlist as well, positive reinforcement. I just want to add in someone who I've been listening to, who I really enjoyed the story. I don't know him. A Day in My Life. His name is Rex Life Raj. I don't know if y'all heard him. Have y'all? He put out this tape called The Blue Hour. And from listening to it, you can tell that both of his parents had to have passed. He talked about both of them. He was talking about how he was too busy making beats on Fruity Loop to stop and learn how to change the carburetor with his dad. And then, you know what happened to dad. And it's like those moments right there that's lost. And then you hear the interlude with his mom talking about how she's so happy that, you know, she can be a representation of people who have cancer, because that's what she was going through. And then she lost her life, and he recorded all this music in the room that she passed in and painted it a different color, like in her memory after that. And then I went to his show and heard his story even more and just started crying as he came off the stage and hugged me, because I went through some similar things, and I made my own pandemic album.
Yeah.
And so with ending this show, you know, I just want to give a shout out to myself, to be honest.
Yes.
To myself, because I was really vulnerable in this episode, and there was a time where I couldn't speak about what I was going through because I thought that people would look at me as crazy, or that I would embarrass my parents, or, you know, honestly, to be honest, like, transparency is a big part of my brand, so I knew it would always be okay for me to talk about my story, and I just hoped that it would bless someone. So my last tape, with everything going on, really is just like my diary, and I'm so glad that we went through that so we can get through to something else. And I just hope that, you know, you all listen to it after this episode and it blesses you all. And most importantly, y'all stay tuned for more content from the Vicki Street Show, more great guests. So let's give a great clap right now for all the guests who came through.
Yes.
Thank you all for tuning in to the Vicki Street Show. Make sure y'all stay tuned for the next episode. I'll see y'all in these streets. Skrr.
Just being a fan, don't worry about what I put up and worry about that minivan.